You took your first steps once. Somebody clapped. You fell, laughed, got back up. You said your first word. A parent probably grabbed a camera or ran to tell someone. It felt like a milestone worth marking, and you have no memory of any of it. Not a flicker, not a fragment. Here's the strange part. You weren't unconscious. You weren't not there yet as a person. Newborns react to pain. They recognize their mother's voice within days. They form preferences, feel fear, feel comfort. A 3-year-old can hold a conversation, make jokes, remember where the toys are hidden. That's not an empty mind. That's a mind clearly running. So if you were awake, aware, and forming a personality that whole time, where did those years go? Today, we're going to actually answer that. Not with a vague, babies just forget, but with what's really happening inside a developing brain and why the machinery that builds a personality is a completely different machine from the one that stores a memory. Let's start with a myth we need to clear out of the way immediately. Memory is not a recording. You don't have a little camera behind your eyes filing away tape for later. A memory is more like a reconstruction, your brain scattering pieces of an event across different regions the moment it happens, then stitching those pieces back together every time you recall it. The color of the room, the sound, the emotion, the sequence, different filing cabinets, different departments, and one coordinator whose job is to pull them all back together on demand. That coordinator has a name. It's called the hippocampus, and it sits deep in the middle of your brain, roughly the size and shape of a curled-up seahorse. Every time you remember your 10th birthday or the way your childhood kitchen smelled, the hippocampus is the thing doing the stitching. And here's the part that explains almost everything. In a baby, that stitching department is barely built. Not missing, just structurally unfinished. Studies using brain imaging show the hippocampus keeps maturing well into early childhood, some regions of it not fully wiring up until you're closer to school age. Imagine trying to run a busy office with half the staff still in training and the filing system still being installed. Things happen in that office, meetings get held, but almost nothing gets filed in a way you could ever pull back out. That alone would explain a lot. But there's a second mechanism working against you at the exact same time, and it's almost the opposite problem. Too much growth, not too little. During the first years of life, the hippocampus is producing new brain cells at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis, and while it sounds like a purely good thing, more brain cells, more brain power, for memory specifically, it's closer to chaos. Picture a library where the shelving system is brilliant and stable, except every single day, workers knock out sections of shelving to jam in new shelves. Every new shelf shoves the old books into different positions. Anything you tried to store last week keeps getting physically relocated by this week's construction. Researchers studying this in animal models found that artificially boosting neurogenesis in adult brains actually erased older memories faster. The new growth was overwriting the old wiring. So picture that combination. An understaffed filing department in a library that's under nonstop construction. That's a toddler's hippocampus. It's not that nothing is worth remembering, it's that the storage system itself hasn't stabilized enough to hang on to anything long-term. Now, here's where it gets more interesting, because there's a third piece, and it's not biological, it's linguistic. Watch how you actually remember things as an adult. You don't usually experience a memory as a raw sensory blast. You experience it as a story. That was the summer we drove to the coast. That was the year the dog got sick. Your memories are threaded onto a timeline, narrated, given a beginning and an end. That narration requires language. Not just the ability to talk, but the cognitive scaffolding language builds, past tense, sequence, cause and effect, a sense of me as a continuous character things are happening to. Before a child has that scaffolding, an experience can register, the fear, the joy, the sensation, but it has nowhere to be filed as a chapter in an ongoing story because there is no ongoing story yet. There's no narrator. Researchers who've studied bilingual children found something remarkable here. Their earliest retrievable memories often cluster around whichever language they were being raised in most heavily at the time. Learn to narrate your life in Spanish first, and your earliest surviving memory is more likely to surface in Spanish. That's not a coincidence. That's language literally functioning as the shelving system memory gets stacked onto. Put all three together: an unfinished hippocampus, memory shuffling neurogenesis, and a narrator who hasn't shown up for work yet, and you get what researchers call childhood amnesia. Almost everyone loses nearly all of their memories from before age 3. Most people's earliest reliable memory doesn't show up until somewhere around 3.5, and it keeps sharpening for a couple years after that. But, and this matters, losing the memory doesn't mean losing the effect. Here's the twist most people never hear. Psychologists separate memory into two very different categories. Explicit memory is the kind you can consciously describe. I remember my 5th birthday party. Implicit memory is everything your brain absorbed and kept using without ever letting you access it directly. The sense that adults are safe or unpredictable, that your needs get met quickly or slowly, that the world responds to you or ignores you. That kind of memory doesn't need a hippocampus at full capacity. It gets laid down early, and it sticks. You can't recall a single specific event that taught you it, but the lesson runs your reactions anyway, decades later, in ways therapists spend entire careers helping people unpack. There's one more piece worth mentioning because it's almost never talked about: sleep. A newborn sleeps something like 16 to 18 hours a day, and a huge share of it is a deep, unusual kind of REM sleep that adults barely experience anymore. For years, scientists assumed all that sleep existed to file away memories, the way it does in grown-ups. But growing research suggests infant sleep is doing something more foundational than filing. It's construction work. It's wiring the basic circuitry itself: vision, movement, emotional regulation. You're not failing to save the day's memories. Your brain is too busy laying cable to bother filing paperwork. So no, you didn't lose those years. Nothing was ever stored in a way that could be retrieved. You were conscious. You were forming attachments, preferences, a personality that's still recognizably yours today. You simply weren't running the kind of hardware that keeps receipts yet. And honestly, there's something almost freeing in that. The years that shaped you the most are the ones you'll never be able to argue with, replay, or correct, because there's no footage to review. All that's left is who you became, which might be the only proof you need that it actually happened.